Yes, I believe now that at least one or two more persons arrived. So we will begin. So today is lecture 4, or unit 4, and I'm going to emphasize the derivation of the demand curve. We talked about the demand curve earlier and talked about demand as the quantity of goods that buyers are willing to buy um, at any given period of time at a given price. Okay, that's essentially what demand is. Now, demand without offering an exchange for it is not demand; it's desire. For example, I desire a Mercedes Benz of $100,000. If I am not willing to pay $100,000 for a Mercedes Benz, then I have not made a demand. That's in economic theory. That is not demand. You can desire the sky. You can desire a mansion. But how much are you willing to pay for the mansion? You're willing to pay $10,000 for a mansion, or $50,000 for a mansion. And then, of course, the seller of a mansion will not be prepared or may not be prepared to sell the mansion to you for $50,000. So the demand has not occurred. There has to be that exchange. But the fact that I would like to own a mansion is a desire. And a desire is not a demand. Now, in economic theory, we ask ourselves, how do you derive a demand curve? How do you derive a demand curve? What gives rise to demand? What gives rise to demand is what we call utility in economics. That's what gives rise to a demand. That is, the rational person will not pay for a product that does not provide satisfaction. And that satisfaction is utility. Eat an apple, it um, solves your craving for something that is tasty, sweet, something that has a sugar type of taste. It fills your stomach, and so that's helps you to not be hungry anymore. That's the utility. You buy clothing. Clothing has utility, and the utility being to cover your body so you don't be exposed. It also could be for you to look good. I've heard someone say that our ancestors did not begin to cover themselves with some kind of apparel. It could be leather of an animal they cover with. Somebody had once, and I read somebody saying that our ancestors from the Stone Age began to make clothing more for decoration and showing off than for protection. I don't know if I would buy that. Nevertheless, the point of the matter is that demand is derived from a utility. And every person kind of has what we call a utility function. Okay? Utility function, and that utility function is illustrated using an indifference curve. So I'm going to pull up a file to go through the process of deriving the demand curve. Let's see who is buzzing us. Just give me a minute. Somebody's buzzing. Stop share. Let's see what's going on here. Okay, I'll go back to sharing. Okay. All right. So here we want to derive a demand curve. Okay. Uh, First of all, consumers have preferences. Consumers have preferences. You like apples, I like oranges. Okay. And if you are offered, I'm sorry, when you have apples and have oranges, and the reason that you like orange is that it provides you the kind of satisfaction from eating a fruit. And I derive a similar satisfaction by eating an apple, and you derive the same satisfaction by eating orange. Okay. And so we have preferences. But the point of the matter is that deriving satisfaction of whatever reason for a product, I mean, for a consumer, is what we call utility. Okay. We just use that word utility. Now, in order to understand how demand is derived, two things come into the picture. Okay. One is, of course, you have a budget constraint. Okay. Budget constraint. And the budget constraint is what leads to a derivation of the demand curve. So the, the consumer has a constrained choice. Consumer has a constrained choice. All right. Okay. Now, let us simplify the matter by looking at a consumer that consumes two goods. Two goods. You can call them A and B, or you can call them apple and orange. Okay? You can call them apple and orange. Two goods. Okay. Now, the person that prefers apple. It does not mean that, let's assume that they does not mean they do not eat orange. Okay. And so if you want to ask yourself, now in a utility function, you have 3 apples and 4 oranges. Okay. And if if you eat 1 apple and 2 oranges, you derive a certain amount of utility. You also derive the same amount of utility if you eat 2 apples and 2 oranges. Okay. Uh, and in the process of making choices between goods, there is something called substitution. And we all understand that simple word in the English language. Consumers also substitute. Consumers also substitute in order to achieve a certain level of utility. Now, we'll talk about um, you know, the properties of consumer preferences, and one of which is uh, what we call non-local satiability. Okay, that is to say, the more you have, the more you want. You can never be fully satisfied. Okay. Now, what we said, we also think about completeness. Okay, when a consumer faces a choice between 2 bundles of goods, only one of the following is true. The consumer might prefer the first bundle to the second or the second bundle to the first, or be indifferent between the two. So this is what we call indifference. Okay, and I'm going to illustrate indifference curves to you and exactly what we mean by indifference. Okay. Now, the transitivity essentially is what we say like 3 plus 4 is the same thing as 4 plus 3. Okay. For example, if A is strictly preferred to B and B is strictly preferred to C, that means then that A must be preferred to C. In the sense that if A is better than B and B is better than C, then A is better than C. In simple language. Okay, if A is better than B and B is better than C, then A is better than C, according to the preference function of the consumer. Okay, and of course, more is better. This is what I call local non-satiability. That is, you cannot satisfy the consumer. Okay, more is better, always. More is always better. Okay, this is a non-satiable property. The more you get, the more you want. Now, there's something we call a preference map. A preference map is like a contour. It's a complete set of indifference curves that summarize the consumer's taste. Okay? And I'll give you an example. What you have here in this figure 4.1 is what we call a preference curve. Now, on my right, you can see where I'm pointing at. That is an indifference curve. Okay, and we're going to illustrate what it means. Now, this here on the bottom left simply shows that the higher the line, the higher the satisfaction that is achieved, that is the higher the utility that is achieved, okay? But only one indifference curve will apply. Let me see if I can then use this to illustrate my point. Okay, let's use the indifference curve at the bottom of the left that I am circling around. Indifference means that, for example, if you're at a point C, you consume 25 of A and 15 of B. And that gives you the level of satisfaction on the indifference curve that I am pointing at. 25A and 15B is okay. It's acceptable to you. But in the event that you have to substitute 15A and 25B will also satisfy you. So at any point along this indifference curve, any combination of goods like 20A and 17B will give you the same amount of satisfaction as 25A and 15B. So whatever combination you see here along this indifference curve gives you the same level of satisfaction as an individual. Because we can make indifference curves, what do you call it, more complicated. But the best indifference curve that we use for illustration is the one that you have here. Okay. Any point along this indifference curve gives you the same satisfaction for the combination of goods. 6Z or 6 pizzas and 2 burritos will give you the same amount of satisfaction as 4 pizzas and 5 burritos. Now, it's like somebody saying to you, okay, you have 6 pizzas and 2 burritos. What will make you give up 2 pizzas? What will make you give up 2 pizzas? Which means you go from 6 to 4 And so from 6 and 2, you will prefer 5 and 4. Okay? And so here, in order to give up 2 pizzas, you want 3 more burritos. That's what this indifference curve is saying. For you to give up 2 pizzas, you want 3 more burritos. So we just described the utility function. Now, the next thing then that determines the demand curve is the budget line. Now, remember, you want to achieve a certain amount of utility. You want to achieve a certain amount of utility. But you are constrained. Let us say that for you to achieve a certain amount of utility, 15 pounds of beef and 20 pounds of chicken will give you a certain amount of utility. Okay? But what if you don't have money to get 15 pounds of beef? You can use the money, you can make a substitution and get 25 pounds of chicken and maybe 14 pounds for beef. So you have a budget line. So let us say here on this budget line, if you spend all your money on burrito, you will get 25 units. If you spend all your money on pizzas, you will get 50 units. But your utility, your highest level of satisfaction is not achieved by eating 50 pizzas. So you don't want to eat 50 pizzas. You want to combine pizza and burrito. You want to combine pizza and burrito. And so your utility function then is going to lie on this budget constraint. As you can see here, your budget is determined at 25 and 50. The utility function comes down. For example, let us look at the utility function I1. Let's take the utility function I1. That is a lower level of utility satisfaction than I2. Now, if you want to combine at G, G gives you, as a matter of fact, if you want to combine at G, G gives you many more burritos than you can afford. Okay, it's above your budget line, and so you cannot afford what is at point G because it's beyond your budget line. Now, suppose you take point C. Point C is 20 and 10. Okay, now that gives you the same level of satisfaction as G, except you cannot afford G. G is above your budget line, and so you're not able to afford it. Now, if you come to point C, yes, point C is within your budget. But if you choose point C within your budget, you are not achieving the maximum possible utility that you can get. Suppose you take point D. Point D gives you the same amount of satisfaction as point C, as point G, but you can see here that point D is below your budget. So you still have resources that enable you to purchase other combinations. Point A is on your budget, but it does not give you the highest possible utility. So now let us look at indifference curve I3. Point F is way above your budget. So we shouldn't even be talking about it. And you will not be able to achieve that level of utility. Now think about what you might call bragging rights. You want mobility. And so you get a Lexus. But you desire point F, which is Mercedes 600 class. Is that what it's called? Okay. But the point is way above your budget. Now, you feel more prestigious if you are driving a 600 class Mercedes Benz compared to uh, Lexus. But the point of the matter is that point F is way above your budget. You cannot afford it. Even though if you could afford it, it gives you a higher level of utility because you feel bigger than everybody else, or you feel bigger than a lot of people because you're driving a Mercedes. And so you feel bigger. You want that level of utility, but you can't get it because you don't have resources above your budget. So the way you then maximize your utility is to be at point E, where you get 30 pizza and 10 burrito. Considering now the price of, um, what do you call it? So here we are simply assuming then, for example, that burrito is $4 a burrito. So you have $100 and pizza is $2 a pizza. So you have another $100. You have $100. And so if you spend all your $100 on pizza at $2 each, you get 50 pizzas. If you spend all your $100 on burrito at $4 a burrito, you get 25 burritos. This is what this budget constraint is about. Okay? And so your highest level of utility will occur if you were to get 10 burritos for $40 and 30 pizzas for 60. You spend your $100. Okay? Now, if you were at point C, you spend $20 for pizzas and what do you call it? $80 for burritos, um, which is within your budget. So that's your $100 gone within your budget, but you will not achieve the highest possible utility for your resources. If you are at point D is way below your budget. And so if you spend money on point D, and whatever the numbers come in here, the combination of burrito and pizza, you will not spend all your money. So you can still go up because you still have resources. Now, let us derive the demand curve. Okay. Now, you have your budget constraint. Okay. Now, let us look at the budget constraint, the lowest one. Okay. It assumes that if you spend all your money on music, you spend 30, or you get something like 15 here. Okay. Now, suppose that prices change. Okay, if prices change, your budget constraint changes. Okay, so you shift the line. You see here, suppose the price of the good on at the bottom here. Suppose the price falls. If the price falls, what happens? What happens is that you'll be able to, the price of the good, let's see what are the tracks, okay, live music, okay. So if the price of tracks falls, your budget constraint will swivel, so to speak, will rotate. And so instead of, you'll be able to still get 30 because the price of live music has not changed, but the price of tracks have changed. And so have actually fallen. So now, if that happens, if the price of tracks has fallen, you will be able to achieve a higher level of utility because you cannot afford more of tracks. And so you can go from utility I1 to utility I2, and the equilibrium, that is the optimal combination, will go from E1 to E2. Now remember that when you go from E1 at a price of 2 there, and so you can buy 2 of track, and yes, because it's the price of track that has changed. It has, initially you will buy 2, okay? At the price of 2, you will buy 6, sorry. At the price of 2, you will buy 6. Now, when the price of tracks falls, your indifference curve goes up because you can achieve more utility because you can consume more. Your new equilibrium is at 2, which means the price has dropped from 2 to 1. The new equilibrium is at 2, okay? But you can see that the quantity of tracks you will buy will change from 6 to 12. And so you add equilibrium E2. So you can see here that the demand curve is sloping downwards. If the price of tracks falls even more, your budget constraint will swivel out some more and you can consume more. And that means you are going to be able to achieve a higher level of utility. And so the quantity of tracks that you can now get goes up to 24. When price falls from 1 to 0.5, we can see you'll be at equilibrium E3. And so your demand curve is downward sloping. So this is how you can derive a downward sloping demand curve. Now you can use a mathematical equation to achieve this, okay? If you take a higher level microeconomics course, maybe if you take an intermediate level course or you take an advanced course, this utility function, this mapping process that we use can also be achieved using a mathematical equation of utility functions and also what do you call it, budget constraints, which can be specified mathematically. And you achieve the same, you demonstrate that the demand curve is downward sloping. But this mapping process that we have used has demonstrated that the demand curve is downward sloping. Okay, so that is the end of my summary of utility functions. So that I'm going to post these, what do you call it, PowerPoint slides so that you can follow what is going on. Okay, so does anybody have any questions? I can pull up the slide again. Sorry, I was hiding my face. Didn't remember that I didn't get back into the picture. So
Professor, I just have one question
sure.
about utility. Like you kind of lost me
Okay.
on utility and how you derive that.
How I derive utility. Okay. So let us basically say that utility means the level of satisfaction that you achieve by consuming a good. It could be food, it could be clothing, it could be entertainment. Okay. It could be watching a movie. Okay. So, what is your question then? Are you asking, or answer what utility means?
We're
Okay.
talking about you were talking about like apples and oranges, and
Okay.
if you like to your range of utility would be like 3 apples to 2 oranges or 4 like I just started getting
All right.
lost.
Okay. Let me get that. Let me get that. I get your issue. Okay. Let us let me use something different from oranges and apples. I can use it. I just would talk about 40 oranges and 30 apples or something like that. Okay. Let us say that there's a certain amount of enjoyment of whatever it is. Okay, there's a certain amount of enjoyment you want to get. All right. And you get it from eating 10 pounds of beef a month and 20 pounds of chicken during the same month. Right? Okay. So that gives you a certain level of enjoyment of meat. You combine beef and chicken, and you are satisfied. Right? That you are happy with that combination. Okay. When you eat beef and you eat chicken, you derive utility. Okay? And utility could be satisfaction of hunger, it could be enjoyment of meat, per se. Okay. Uh, it could even be, for example, a feeling of prestige that if beef takes so much. Am I correct? Okay. Somebody that does not have money, instead of eating 15 pounds of beef a month and 20 pounds of chicken, they'll eat 1 pound of beef and 40 pounds of chicken. Am I correct?
Yeah.
Or they may eat 1 pound of beef and just 2 pounds of chicken because that's what they can afford. But the long and short of it is that the consumption of beef and chicken gives you satisfaction. Let's say that you are the one that can afford 10 pounds of beef a month and 25 pounds of chicken, right? Yeah. What we call an indifference curve, and so you should focus on the indifference curve because the concept of utility is clear. Utility is just the enjoyment or the satisfaction that you derive by consuming something. Doesn't matter what it is. That's what utility means. Now, in using the utility function to derive a demand curve, we'll talk about utility function. And so if 15 pounds of beef and 25 pounds of chicken give you a certain level of satisfaction that is acceptable to you, right? Now, what we talk about in utility function is that 1025 gives you a certain level of satisfaction. But 927 will also give you the same level of satisfaction. 830 would give you the same level of satisfaction. So this is that curve you're looking at that says as long as you're on this curve, the combinations on this curve will give you the same level of satisfaction. Okay? Now, in using it to derive a demand curve, we are simply saying that certain combinations on that utility function may be above your budget. And so you can't afford being on a certain level. It's like climbing a hill. Okay? The sense, think about energy. Can you climb Mount Everest? Precisely. But you can get to the bottom of Mount Everest and climb up to a mile, and your energy will be gone. Am I correct? So if you try to go 2 miles, then you don't have the energy. If you go 1 mile, half a mile, a quarter mile, your energy will still be there. So that's your budget constraint, your energy budget constraint. The same thing goes for the utility function. Okay, let me bring it back again. Okay, you see here an I1. Okay, let me. Okay. This is better. Demonstration. Okay. Here, this is a utility function I1. If you're in G, 10 miles up Mount Everest, you don't have the energy because your energy is the blue line. Energy is the blue line, so you cannot get to G. But if you were able to afford it, it gives you a certain level of satisfaction. C also gives you the same level of satisfaction, but you can afford C. You get the idea? You can afford C. But the point of the matter is that if you're on C, you can see that the utility function I1 is less than the utility level of I2. So if you're in C, you are not achieving your best utility because you can do better by being on utility function I2 and consuming 30 and 10. Instead of 20 and 10, that is 20 burrito and 10 pizza, you can do much better by consuming 30 pizza and 10 burrito by being on a higher indifference curve. You cannot afford indifference curve 3 because you don't have the budget. You get the point? You don't have the resources.
I got it now. I got it now. Thank you.
You get it? Okay.
Yes.
Any other questions? All right. Hearing none, can I say it was nice having you all once more?
I'm sorry, sir.
Yes.
Not pertaining to this particular lesson, but pertaining to, I guess we have midterms coming up. A midterm? When does,
I'm not sure.
let me,
Just the final.
There's the final exam. There's the final exam.
just the final. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So there's, so really we're just responsible for, I know we have the critiques, we have the discussions, and I'm trying to see, and the final. Is there
Yes.
anything else? Do we have to do well, I guess we generally would have to do the reflection questions as well, correct?
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Now,
Okay.
next week is the 15th. I will be in the air, but I will post the PowerPoint slides for you to see. Okay. What I might do, I will post the PowerPoint slides. If you have questions, you can ask me. I might, try to work something out where I can find time and connect with the class. If I do, I will let you know. Okay. And I will
All right.
notify you before the 15th or around that time that just to remind you that I will not be able to do the lecture, but I will post the PowerPoint slides for for the next unit. And then when we get back on the 23rd, you can ask me questions. You can raise questions about the previous set of slides.
Got you. All right.
All right.
Thank you, Professor.
All right. Okay, then.
Have
Have
a
a
good night,
nice
fellas.
evening, everybody.
Have a good night, sir.
Good night.